This is the Jeanie bag. It's a brand new sewing bag pattern from Studio 77, and on this video I'm going to show you how to sew it step by step. While I show you preparing the pattern pieces, don't worry, I'm going to talk you through that in a minute, I wanted to tell you a couple of pieces of important information about this video. To find out all the features of this bag, please check out the introductory video which you can find in the description, along with the timestamps for this tutorial to take you through to the part of the instructions that you want to see, as well as links on where to get this pattern. This pattern was originally part of the 77 Club, which you can find more information about in the description too. If you have any questions, comments or queries throughout this video, please do comment and I will get back to you as soon as possible. So let's get into the preparation. Once you've cut out the paper pattern, you will of course want to cut out all the pattern pieces and interface each piece as shown in the instructions and cutting chart. I am using a thicker vinyl in this tutorial for the outer fabric, so I don't need to interface the outer fabric. I'm also using a waterproof canvas for the lining, so I don't need to interface that either. I recommend you use a thinner fabric or thinner faux leather for the top straps of the bag to help with the bulk on your machine. So I have chosen a soft faux lamb's leather for these top straps and the handle of the bag. Here's a little more information on your fabric choice. Now this pattern was originally designed together with my 13-year-old to be made out of a pair of jeans. As you will see in this video, I'm not going to be using a pair of jeans, but if you are going to be making yours out of an old pair of jeans, I just wanted to let you know that the pattern pieces do fit really nicely into most sizes of jeans. This is a man's pair of jeans, man's size, but this original one was made out of my daughter's old jeans, which were around about age 11, I believe. And you will see that the pattern pieces fit nicely within the leg area, so you can see that they go across the width. Even if it's a skinny pair of jeans for a child, you'll be able to fit this pattern onto there. If you are using a longer strap, obviously you're going to want to bear that in mind, because you're going to want to have that across the length of one of the legs, so just plan that out when you're cutting your pieces out. I would definitely interface if you're using denim or jeans, because there is often a little bit of elastane in there or stretch, which you don't want to have in your bag making. So definitely follow the guide for your interfacing. Remember that we always use woven interfacing for our outer pieces and non-woven for our lining pieces. That's all within the pattern as well. So we've talked about your fabric choice and you've cut out your fabrics and interfaced them. So then you need to add stabilizer to the backs of some of the pattern pieces. I always cut the seam allowance off my stabilizer to help with bulky seams under the machine as well. Okay, so after cutting everything out, I've also added my stabilizer, and I like to clip my pattern pieces to each part, each bundle. But of course I also have the little labels as well that you can use if you prefer. So just to reiterate, we're putting our stabilizer on the back of pattern piece 1, the two fronts or two outer fabrics, and we're putting it on the back of our gusset, pattern piece 2, and we're putting it on the back of the front flap, which is pattern piece 3. And as you can see, it's all out of our seam allowance. You're also going to need some hardware and some tools. So for the hardware, you're going to need 8 or 9mm double capped rivets, and we're going to be using 15 of these. You're going to need some strap ends as well for the bottom of the straps that go on the front flap, and these are 3/4 inch or 20mm. As well as those strap ends, we're going to need 4 rectangle rings. You could change out 2 of those for D-rings and then add some lobster clasps to make a removable strap if you want to, but we're going to be following the pattern and using the rectangle rings. You're also going to need an 18mm magnetic clasp, and you're going to need a zipper for the inside pocket. I'm using a number 3 zipper, but you can use a number 5 if you want to use a pattern zipper and a fancy pull. For the tools, we're just going to be using our regular tools, but I'm also adding in here as well some pinking shears. You're going to find these useful when it comes to cutting around the flap, but if you don't have pinking shears, that's totally fine. You can also snip into them with your regular scissors. I'm also going to be using this B7000 glue because I find that it helps with gluing in the screws when we put in our strap ends. I'm going to be using a Microtex needle throughout, and I'm using a Jeanie HD9 for this project, but I know that you can use this on all domestic machines or industrials if you prefer. If you are going to be making it out of a denim or jean fabric, just bear in mind your machine capabilities. It can get a bit thick, especially on these straps, so bear that in mind. You may want to go up to a 110 jeans needle when you get to some of those thicker layers. So just bear that in mind for your fabric choice when deciding what you're going to do. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to start off with making our strap connectors, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do that. I have got two different fabric choices here. I'm actually going to be using this outer vinyl from this project throughout this tutorial, but I wanted to show you how to make it out of a thinner option as well, so you've got the option for your strap connectors. So this is pattern piece 7. You're going to cut out the outer rectangle, and you're going to be cutting out 4 pieces like I have for this vinyl. I'm just going to pop the vinyl to one side because it's very likely you'll be using this technique that I'm going to show you on here. So I'm going to place them right sides together, and then I'm actually going to cut out that inner shape from that pattern piece. Then I'm going to grab a marking tool, and I'm just going to draw around that whole shape, keeping it well in the center or in the middle, so you've got lots of space around. And if this was going to be my real strap connector, I would of course interface it, but for this sample I'm not going to. I'm then going to take that to the machine and I'm going to stitch all the way around. However, there's 2 different ways you can do this. You can either stitch all the way around that shape, which is what I'm going to do, or if you do have thinner fabric, which this would actually be fine for, you can leave a gap in the middle, a turning gap each side. I'm going to show you the other technique, which means that we're going to stitch all the way around. Okay, so now that that's stitched, I'm going to take my pinking shears and I'm going to cut all the way around. You could use snips to cut little triangles as well if you don't have pinking shears. Like that. And you may be thinking, how are we going to get this to the outside? And this was a tester tip. This is a bit of a quilting technique, and it's a really good one to learn for these kind of situations. If I can just get the 2 fabrics to be pulled apart so I'm not cutting both, and you're going to just make a little snip into one side. Really important, it's just one side, and we're cutting up the middle just about, I don't know, about 1 inch, about 2.5 centimeters. Doesn't matter that I've taken a little nick out of there, that's totally fine. And then we're going to reach through. This is why it needs to be interfaced as well. We're going to reach through and pop the whole thing the right way out. Now, like I say, you can leave a regular turning gap and do it the normal way. This is all going to be on the inside where that slit is. You're never going to see that cut, so it's totally fine. Give it a little wiggle, and if you're using quilting cotton, you can of course give this a nice big press as well. And you can see from the front that looks really good. I'm going to then top stitch all the way around the outside, and then that is going to be our strap connector, which goes onto the side of our bag a little bit later. So that's one way to do it, and then we're going to thread it onto one of our rectangular rings. Make sure those stitches are tucked in. And as you can see, the cut slit goes inside. You're never going to see that. So then I'm going to pop a clip on that and pop that to one side. If that is my method, I'm then going to repeat that again for the other 2 strap connectors to make the other side. But if you have got a thicker vinyl like I have, there is another method as well. So I'm going to place these wrong sides together for this technique. Pop a clip in there, grab my pattern piece and my white pen, and this is a way for having the raw edges. Now you can either edge coat them at the end, or you can leave them raw. Totally up to you. Looks a bit nicer and a bit more professional with the edge coating. I've not quite gone around that shape there. Not the easiest faux leather or vinyl to draw on, must admit, but as long as I can see it as a guide. Right, then I'm going to take it over to the machine and I'm going to stitch that using this as if it was the edge and just stitching a couple of millimeters or about 1/8 of an inch inside that line. I'm then going to wipe off that gel pen. I might need a little bit of water, but before I do that, I want to just cut around that line and cut through both layers. This is way easier than trying to line up the two shapes and stitching them around. Always easier to cut it after. Like so. I think for this vinyl I don't really need to edge coat it, so I'm going to get rid of those white lines and I'm going to pop that onto my rectangle ring for a little bit later. I'm also of course going to repeat that for the other strap connector and put them both to one side. So next up we're going to work on making the front flap. So we're going to grab our 2 pattern piece 3s and we've got our lining and our outer, of course. We're going to place them right sides together and I'm going to clip all the way around the outside. I'm going to leave that top edge open actually. So the 2 sides and the bottom edge. And then we're going to stitch along the 2 sides and that bottom curved edge. We're not going to stitch along that top edge. And because of the materials I'm using, because I'm using this vinyl or faux leather and waterproof canvas, I'm using a 3 stitch length for all my structural seams and I'm using a 3.5 stitch length for all my top stitching. Then I'm going to take my pinking shears and I'm just going to snip around those curved bottom edges or edge. Being careful not to cut the stitches. And in fact, I'm going to use my pinking shears up the side as well, but you could do a straight seam, straight cut, just cut off that excess seam allowance. I want to make sure I've definitely got some good excess cut out of those curves. Yeah, that's fine. And then I'm going to turn that flap all the way through. So with that turned through, I'm going to take that over to the machine and I'm going to top stitch around the 2 sides and that bottom curve, but I'm leaving open that top edge. Before we do that, we're going to fold in that top edge so that when we're top stitching, we're just keeping that in place, but we're not actually closing it because we're going to be top stitching along this edge. So we want to keep that seam allowance nicely folded inside because when we come to do it later, that is going to help us keep it nice and neat. So I'm going to pull my threads to the back to just secure those off. Next, we need to make some markings on the right side of the flap. So we need to measure down 3.5 inches from that top edge, or 9 centimeters down. And we need to make some kind of mark. So it could be a crease. In the pattern it says a crease, but for my vinyl, it's not going to like that. So I'm just going to make a little mark on each side that I know can be removed. You could use chalk as well. And I'm going to then mark as well 1.25 inches from each side edge. And this again is on the right side, and it's in some kind of removable chalk or pen. 1.25 inches is 3.2 centimeters. Okay, so we've got those marks. I'm then going to turn it over, and I'm going to mark 1 inch up from the bottom. And I need to change over to a removable pen and find the middle. And that is where we're going to put our female side of our magnetic snap. So grab the female and the keeper. Now it's always a good idea to put a little bit of Decaville behind that as well. So I'm going to grab an offcut of Decaville. Going to cut another piece while I'm here for the other side when we get to it. I always round the corners. And if you're using a fabric that you can fuse, then you can obviously fuse that in place. And although this is fiddly, it is easier doing the top stitching before, because then you don't need to get in the way of the foot and everything. And I just find it's easier doing this after. Put the keeper in. Like so. Okay, so we're going to pop that to one side, and we're going to move on to the straps. So for my straps, as I mentioned earlier, I have used this thinner faux leather. You don't have to do lots of interfacing if you're using a faux leather or a vinyl. There's no kind of strength to these straps. These are purely decorative. So you may want to omit that if you're using faux leather or vinyl for your straps. I have also used a thinner faux leather to my outer, because this is really quite rigid, and I knew that folding this would be a little bit of a, folding that one would be a bit of a pickle. So I have used this more like a lamb's faux leather. If you are using something that is thicker, what you might want to do is cut down your straps to be half of the width, and then you're just going to fold in and fold in on this part. So you're not going to be doing the double fold, which we're going to be doing. So to do the double fold, you're going to grab a ruler and you're going to measure along the width and find the middle. Then you're going to fold it in to that middle. I'm going to pop a clip just on one end for now and fold the other side in to that middle, and again pop a clip. You could put double-sided tape down the middle if you want to. Then this bit is a little bit different. We're going to fold it back, right sides together, like so. I'm going to pop that clip, move that to there, and then we're going to stitch 1 centimeter from the end on that little end, and you'll see why in a second. So it looks like that. Then I'm going to cut triangle away, and we're going to flip that. In fact, before we do that, we're going to just cut off a little bit of the seam allowance on one side to create less bulk, like so. So it's kind of stepped. Hopefully you can see that. And then we're going to flip that like so. That is going to create a nice folded end. You only need to do this on one end. The other end being raw is totally fine. And if you want to at this point, like I say, we're going to put some double-sided down there so that the faux leather is going to sit really nicely. Then we're going to take it over to the machine and we're going to top stitch along one long edge, along the short edge, and then back up. We don't need to do that open raw edge. So with that stitched, we're going to do the same with the other short strap. And we're also going to do the same with the two long straps. So they've all got one enclosed end and one raw end. Okay, so with that stitched up, we are then going to add one of our strap ends to the raw open end. Okay, so we're going to take out the little screws. I like to add a little bit of glue in the strap end as well, just to help it. In fact, I'm going to add that to the bottom of the strap. If you get any showing like that, just going to wipe that away before it dries. And then add in our screws. Again, some more glue, little tiny bit. And this is B7000 glue that I'm using, but this is optional, of course. You don't have to put glue in the ends, just does keep it a little bit stronger. So then we're going to repeat that with the other long strap. And then you're going to repeat the same process that you did to make the straps with the other two short straps, so that you have a closed end on each and an open end on each. You're going to put the long straps to one side, and we're going to grab the top flap that we stitched before, and we're going to be adding in the raw or open end of that strap so that it is tucked in that open top straight edge. Now, in order to know how much to tuck it in by, you want to measure 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters, and you're going to make a fold there, because that's where we're going to attach our rectangle ring a bit later. And then we're going to line it up with that mark that we made before. Okay, so we're going to clip, hold that in place, sorry. And then we're going to tuck that in. We know it's 1.5 centimeters seam allowance at the top. And if you've got quilting cotton for the outside or fabric that will crease nicely, unlike this vinyl, you can, of course, follow the crease that you've made. And then we're going to open it up, pop a clip in, and we're going to repeat the same on the other side. And again, this is with our short strap. And the fold that we're aligning with is the mark that we made before as well. So that way, if there's any discrepancies with the closed end that you stitched or anything like that, we are going to get it in the right place, matching up both sides. I'm just going to fold in the rest of that seam allowance and clip it in place. Then I'm going to take that to the machine and I'm going to top stitch along that edge, matching up the end of our stitch line on each side to hold those two short straps in place. We are not folding the short strap down because that's going to make it too bulky. So all you need to do is stitch straight along that top edge. So with those stitched, we're just going to pop that to one side for a second. We're going to grab our two long straps that have got the strap ends on, and we're going to grab our two rectangle rings. Just work on one for the minute, and we're going to feed that through the bottom edge of the rectangle ring, and we're going to have our overlap of around about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters, like so. I'm going to pop a clip in there. Same with the other one. Making sure that the front of the strap end is facing up. It is of course really important that they are exactly the same. That's fine. Then I'm going to grab that top flap that we have just stitched, and I'm going to pop, we have not put a rivet in this yet, we're going to pop that so that the rectangle is spanning that mark that we made earlier. Okay, so that needs to be in the middle. I have made a kind of preliminary crease. Again, if you have a fabric that creases nicely, that's going to be a lot easier. The Decaville helps because Decaville creases quite nicely inside. And then we're going to have that span that mark, and we're following that line from the edge as well. I'm going to pop a clip at the bottom to keep that in place. And then I'm going to grab the short strap and feed that through the rectangle. And just like we measured before, that should be around about 1 inch at the top, following that line, so that it's all following those lines we made before, and that rectangle ring spans that crease. You may want to, at this point, just give it a bit of a fold, so make sure that nothing is pulling or stopping it from creasing, folding on that line. And I'm going to just pop in some clips, keep that in place. And then I'm going to pop a rivet around about 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch from the edge of that rectangle ring. And it's going to go all the way through the strap front, the fold underneath, and that top flap through to the lining. So I'm going to pop one at the top and one at the bottom, and then one around about 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch from the bottom. The bottom one is optional. You may want it to, the strap to kind of flap a bit more, but I'm going to pop that in there for this demo. So with the top strap done on that side, we're then going to repeat the process with the other side. So with those top straps attached, it's now a good idea to remove any marks that you made for the placement, and we're going to pop that to one side. So next we're going to move along to the lining, and we're going to need our zipper pocket, which is pattern piece 4, and our pattern piece 1 lining, front and back. And we just need one of the pattern piece 1 at the moment, and one of our zipper pockets, pattern piece 4. And with the right side facing up of pattern piece 1, we're going to lay down right sides facing, so wrong sides up, of pattern piece 4, and that is going to be centered, and it's going to be 2 centimeters down from the top. If you are able to, you can of course then pin that in place, and we're going to draw on a rectangle that is 3.5 centimeters down from the top. So it's 1.5 centimeters from the top of pattern piece 4. So your rectangle is going to be 3.5 centimeters from the top, or 1.5 centimeters from the top of pattern piece 4. It's going to be 15 centimeters wide, and it's going to be 1 centimetre high, so you can get that rectangle. I am going to fold over my pieces so that I can pop in a clip, because I cannot pin this fabric because it's waterproof canvas. And then I'm going to head over to the machine, being careful now that I've clipped that in place I don't catch that corner, and I'm going to stitch around all the way around that rectangle. I'm going to use a 2.5 stitch length throughout. When I get to the corners at each end, I'm going to go down to a 2 or 1.5 stitch length to get those corners really nice and crisp. We're then going to cut all the way down the middle of that rectangle and put a fork cut into each end. Of course, being super careful not to snip the stitches, like so. Then we're going to push that all the way through to the wrong side, so it's wrong sides facing. Definitely easier on something like a quilting cotton, but totally doable with this. Just have to give it a little bit of coaxing. Don't be afraid to pull those corners and get those fibres lying exactly how we want them to. Now for the next bit, double-sided tape is going to absolutely be our friend. So I'm going to grab some of that and get ready to put our zip in. I'm going to place my tape along the top and bottom fold on the pocket side, and we're going to centre our zip into that rectangular hole. I'm actually going to move mine down a bit because this is a shop bought zipper, a finished zipper. It's got those stoppers, and I want to make sure that my stitches don't go anywhere near, or my needle doesn't go anywhere near that. So I'm just going to centre it a bit more to avoid that at each end. It takes some time getting this right. It is fiddly, but you're going to get a much better finish if you take the time doing this to get it lined up nicely. Okay, so that's nicely centered, and then I'm going to top stitch all the way around to keep that zipper in place. So I've stitched that in place, and then I've added a little label. Of course, you don't have to do that. Ideally, I wouldn't have stitched all the way through the pocket, but it is what it is. I can still sew the pocket up. So I'm going to cut off the excess of the zipper because it is a shop bought zipper. And a little reminder not to use your fabric scissors. These are my paper scissors to cut through your zipper teeth. Okay, so with the wrong side facing up of the lining, we're going to place the right sides together of pattern piece 4, and I'm going to clip all the way around the outside. We're going to stitch around the 3 sides, but we're going to leave an opening at the bottom edge. And when you're sewing this, you're going to want to sew it from the top of the panel, and you're going to pull the front pattern piece 1 out of the way so that you can get to it. That way you're going to keep the pocket nice and flat. And remember, we're leaving a turning hole, an opening in that bottom edge around about 4 inches. And we're using a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So with that pocket sewn, we're then going to attach our gusset, which is pattern piece 2. So we're going to grab our lining. I'm going to find the middle, and I'm just going to put a small notch in there. You could also mark it, of course, as well. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And I'm going to find the middle of my pattern piece 1. And while I'm here, I'm going to find the middle of the top of the lining as well. Again, tiny little notch. I'm going to grab my other pattern piece 1, do the same, middle of the top and bottom edge. And we're just doing a couple of millimeters, or again, you can just make a mark with a pen. Then I'm going to match up the gusset, clipping it all the way around the 2 sides and that bottom curved edge. Now, what you might find as well is that it's going to be tricky to go around this curve. So for this, we're going to just make, again, just around about a couple of millimeters or 1/8 of an inch, small snips going around both of the curves to help it ease in, and you'll find that it matches a lot better for sewing. Then we're going to stitch that with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So with that stitched, we're then going to place the other side on. But this time when we clip and stitch around, we're going to leave an opening of around 4 or 5 inches along that bottom edge. We're matching up the middle again of both pieces, just like before. So with the lining sewn up, we're going to repeat that with the outer pieces. So pattern piece 2 of our outer and our 2 pattern piece 1s. But this time we are not going to be leaving the turning hole. Of course, we're going to stitch up all the way around on both sides. When you're sewing this around the decaville, you're going to find it a lot easier to sew with a zipper foot. And I'm going to match my thread rather than the rainbow. I'm going to make it a dark thread in case any of the stitches are showing through on the outside. A top tip as well, if you've got thicker vinyl like I have, is to sew another line of stitching around about 1 millimeter, or just basically next to it, not on top of it, to help stop those stitches pulling on the outside. So with that stitch, we're going to turn it the right way out, and then we're going to put it to one side. And we're going to grab the top flap that we made earlier, and we're going to mark and punch holes along this bottom edge, which is actually the top edge, but we're going to call it the bottom edge for now, the straight edge. And we need to mark in 1.5 centimeters or 9/16 of an inch from each edge, and then also from each edge of the strap, and then in the middle as well. And then we're going to mark 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch up, and that is going to be the middle of our rivets. Then we're going to grab our outer bag. Make sure if there's anything that you like about the front that you choose the back. This one doesn't really matter too much. I'll grab a ruler actually, and I'm going to mark 3 centimeters down from that top raw edge. And again, this is in a pen that is removable. I've got a gel pen because I'm using vinyl, but you're going to want to test it beforehand. Friction pen is always good if you're using any kind of quilting cotton. Just going to make a couple of marks so that I can see. Then we're going to place the top flap along that line. And I'm going to mark through, I'm going to actually make sure it's centered and pop a clip or two in there. Even if it's just to temporarily hold it. And then I'm going to mark through with my pen, making sure that is nice and straight on that line. Mark through with the pen where the holes are to go. With any luck, that's gone through. There we go. Going to make those holes and then we can pop our rivets in to hold the top flap in place. Now you could do this at the end when you've made the bag and have the rivets go all the way through to your lining. I'm just going to make sure that that's completely, those holes are lined up. Yeah, you could do that at the end of your sewing so that it's going through the lining too. That would make it easier for top stitching and sewing. Totally up to you how you do it. I'm going to do it how the pattern tells you to do it so that it stays in line with the instructions. Just bear in mind if you are going to attach the flap at the end so it goes through to the lining that it may clash with your zipper pocket. You may therefore want to put your zipper pocket on the lining front inside. Okay, now we need to think about where we're going to put the other side of our magnet. So grab those pieces. So this is going to be 6 centimeters or 2 3/8 of an inch up from the bottom. So I'm going to make a little mark. Obviously find the center as well. Check that that does in fact work. Obviously we need to bear in mind that there's some seam allowance at the top, but that's looking good so far. So I'm going to pop in that magnetic clasp. And I like to put a little bit of gaffer tape or duct tape on the inside just to keep those prongs all nice and smoothly down and stop them rubbing on the lining, like so. Triple check that that works. Yeah, it's looking good. So now we need to attach our lining. So we're going to turn the bag so that it is wrong side out. And if you have got a stiff vinyl like I have, sometimes it helps using a hairdryer to soften the vinyl and help for turning it out and birthing it. We're going to place the flap on the inside as well, tuck it out of the way. We're going to grab our lining and we're going to turn that so that it is wrong side out and pop it onto the inside so that it is right sides facing, the right side of the outer and the right side of the lining. And we're going to match up, make sure you've got the pocket on the right side that you want it to be on. And we're going to match up, remember we made those notches or the marks earlier, we're going to match those up. We're going to clip all the way around the top and then we're going to stitch it with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when sewing this, you're going to probably want to use a zipper foot so that you can get it close to that top flap that we've already riveted in. Okay, so with that stitched around the top, we're then going to birth the bag. I am going to use a hairdryer this time just to make it a bit softer for birthing through, and we're going to be doing that obviously through the hole in the lining that we stitched earlier, or we left open earlier. Then we're going to open up the zipper pocket, and we can reach through that hole that we didn't stitch at the bottom of the zipper, and we can pull out that hole in the lining that we used to birth the bag, and I'm going to clip that and stitch that closed. So once the lining is stitched up, then we can reach through, put the lining back in, reach through and pull out the zipper pocket, and then you can either hand stitch this closed, or if you want a bit of speed, or if you're using waterproof canvas like me, I'm going to machine stitch that closed just by folding in the seam allowance and then top stitching quite close to the edge. And I'm using a very similar colour to my waterproof canvas, so it's a little bit more invisible. Okay, so I'm going to tuck the zipper pocket inside, pop the lining back inside as well. Now at this stage you can top stitch around the top of your bag. If you are using a domestic machine, this is going to be a little bit easier. Definitely on an industrial or semi-industrial like mine, it's going to be a lot harder. You don't have to top stitch it though. I'm going to pop some clips in here to help it have a kind of memory while we do the strap. So we're going to pop that to one side and we're going to make our strap. So you can find a list of suggested lengths in the instructions. I have put some fusible interfacing, this is woven interfacing, on the strap or the handle, because this is obviously going to get a lot of wear and tear. We want it to be nice and strong and to not have any give or stretch. So I'm going to mark the middle, and I'm going to do exactly the same as I did on the straps that go on the flap of the bag. I'm going to fold them in to each other and then fold again to make a nice long strap. Now, just like we did before, I'm actually going to open that up. We want to fold it so that we can get some nice enclosed ends, just like we did on the short straps. So you can find the timestamps below if you want to jump back and see that in a bit more slow motion. But I'm going to go ahead and do that on each end with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, or 3/8 of an inch on each end. Cut them down, flip them through, and then I'm going to top stitch all the way around the strap. Okay, so with our strap sewn up, we're then going to attach it to the bag. So we want to grab our strap connectors that we made at the beginning of the tutorial, or earlier on in the tutorial, and we are going to place those over the ends, the two sides of our bag, and we're going to pop a rivet in there. But before we do that, we're going to make our marking, and our marking is going to be around about 1.5 centimetres up from the bottom and centered. And I'm going to make that mark on the other one as well. Pop a hole. Then we're going to find the middle of the side. And I'm going to place one of the strap connectors on, matching up with that mark. That is pretty perfect. In there. It's pretty much the bottom of that mark. pop a hole in, and then we can pop our rivet in to not only hold down the strap connector or attach the strap connector, but hold down our lining as well. So we're nearly there. We just need to attach our handles now, or handle. Feed it through from the outside in. We're going to measure up around about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. Then we're going to pop a clip. Make sure it's not twisted. And I'm marking around about 1 centimeter up or 3/8 of an inch, just like all the other times. And it's from the top edge of that rectangle. So there you go, your Jeanie is all finished and you're ready to hit the town. Thanks so much for watching this tutorial. You can find everything that I've mentioned in the description below. Don't forget to leave a comment and let me know if you're going to make this one. Coming up on the screen right now is a tutorial that I think you're going to love. It's a 2-tone strap using quite a unique technique. It would look great on this bag as well. I'll see you in the next video.